My other writings are no sooner dry than they revolt me, but my epitaph still meets with my approval. There is little chance, unfortunately, of its ever being reared above the skull that conceived it, unless the state takes up the matter. But to be unearthed, I must first be found, and I greatly fear those gentlemen will have as much trouble finding me dead as alive. So I hasten to record it here and now while there is yet time. Hereunder lies the above, who up below so hourly died that he lived on till now.
Beckett spent a long period during the war in the Roussillon. When he had finally succeeded getting back to Ireland, he wanted to get back to Paris, but you couldn't travel. The war was still on. The Allied armies were going towards Germany. And so in order to get back to France, he joined the Irish Red Cross and worked as an orderly in the Irish hospital at Saint-Lô in Normandy, which was the one place in Normandy which had been totally wiped out, because that was the place where they first landed. And the landscape of desolation and total ruin recurs ever after in his work.
I think that to the end of its hospital days, it will be called the Irish Hospital. I mention this possibility in the hope that it will give general satisfaction. And having done so, I may perhaps venture to mention another, more remote, but perhaps of greater import in certain quarters. I mean the possibility that some of those who were in Saint-Lô will come home realizing that they got at least as good as they gave, that they got indeed what they could hardly give, a vision and sense of a time-honored conception of humanity in ruins, and perhaps even an inkling of the terms in which our condition is to be thought again. These will have been in France.
When it was safe to do so, Sam and Suzanne returned to Paris, returned to the flat in the Rue des Favorites, which they found intact, all that stuff still there. But life couldn't be the same as it was before the war. A lot of their friends had gone. Of course, Joyce was gone. Sam's great friend, Alfred Perron, had been captured and died, not in captivity, but died just after he was released. Life, indeed, was in Paris, post-war Paris, was a lot different.
The news of France is very depressing. Depresses me, anyhow. All the wrong things, all the wrong way. It is hard sometimes to feel the France that one clung to, that I still cling to. I don't mean material conditions which are appalling. It is quite impossible for me to live now with my pittance. I had hoped my books would make up the difference, but there is little chance of their pleasing here more than elsewhere. Suzanne earns a little money with her dressmaking. That is what we're living on at present.
39 today, sound as a bell, apart from my old weakness, and intellectually, I have now every reason to suspect it the crest of the wave, or thereabouts. Celebrated the awful occasion, as in recent years, quietly at the wine house. Not a soul. Sat before the fire with closed eyes, separating the grain from the husks. I jotted down a few notes on the back of an envelope. Good to be back in my den, in my old rags.
He started writing furiously, and this really set off his creativity. Whereas previously, it had been said by various people that he's very talented, but he'll never do anything because he's too idle, he never does anything. He was very lethargic. Rather, I think because of psychological problems, he again felt it was worth doing anything. And this suddenly set him off, and he started writing. Between 46 and 49, he had this tremendous outburst, so much so that his wife was very worried because he was writing day and night, and she thought he'd collapse.
All this business of a labor to accomplish, before I can end, of words to say, a truth to recover, in order to say it before I can end, of an imposed task once known, long neglected, finally forgotten, to perform before I can be done with speaking, done with listening. I invented it all in the hope it would console me, help me to go on, allow me to think of myself as somewhere on a road, moving between a beginning and an end, gaining ground, losing ground, getting lost, but somehow in the long run making headway. All lies. I have nothing to do, that is to say, nothing in particular. I have to speak, whatever that means.
I'm tired. From overwriting, probably. A book of short stories, 2 novels, and a play in under 2 years. They go out into the usual void, and I hear little more about them.
In the summer of 1950, Beckett returned to Dublin to be with his mother, who was dying of Parkinson's disease. She was moved from Foxrock to the Merrion nursing home overlooking the Grand Canal. Beckett stayed with her throughout her final illness.
I was there when... the blind went down. One of those dirty brown roller affairs, throwing a ball for a little white dog, as chance would have it. I happened to look up, and there it was, all over and done with at last. I sat on for a few moments with the ball in my hand and the dog yelping and pawing at me. Moments. Her moments. My moments. The dog's moments.
Suzanne took it upon herself. He got fed up with it. He wasn't interested. He had given up hope, I think. But she took it upon herself to take the manuscripts round from one publisher to the other, get one rejection slip after another. And eventually heard about a young publisher called Jérôme Landon, went to see him, and he said, fine, bring the manuscripts, and I'll read them.
Beckett waited across the street in the Café Cluny. He was insisting that Malloy, Malone Dies, and The Unnameable be published as a trilogy or not at all. The news was good. Enchanted by what he described as the overwhelming beauty of the text, Landon agreed a contract. With each book of the trilogy, Beckett descended to a lower level. He felt he was on a road going nowhere. He looked, he said, for a habitable place. He found it on the stage. Beckett found in the theatre a way of making public his private world of humor and compassion.
This is the location where I was, the Théâtre de Babylone, 40 years ago. This is the place where all Paris was coming to see, waiting for Godot by an unknown author who was Sam Beckett. The theater himself was just behind the trees, and the stage door was at the far end, and it was 4 actors and a young boy entering every night to play Godot.
To us, the background was Roger Blain, because he was the one who had the play and who had shown it to different theaters for almost 2 years, I think. And nobody would really have the courage to do it, or the comprehension. They didn't understand, probably. And when Jean-Marie Serrault, who was the director of our theaters, got the script, he just showed it to me to be sure that I agreed, and it was the most astonishing experience I can think of.
When I received my first line, I was lucky, you know, lucky in the 2 meaning of the word, because the part was named Lucky, and I was so lucky to play that part. I met Sam for the very first time in my life by a bright and sunny afternoon in autumn in '52. He was in the auditorium, and I came, he gave me the text, I read it, and I was wondering what to do. I obtained no explanations, and the other actors were working the same. But we were smelling that we were in front of a very important chef-d'oeuvre.
I suppose the actors were the important thing, and Roger Blain had a very definite and sure sense of choosing them. And maybe his great idea was to take 2 actors of the, what we called at that time, a cabaret.
In that time, a doctor, friend of mine, Marthe Gauthier, showed me some people who was what we called Parkinsonians. And it's an awful illness, and you are trembling all the time at the end of that illness. And it saved my part, because suddenly when I had to talk, I was wearing one trunk in my left hand and a basket in my right hand. I was standing on my left leg, trembling from the foot to the shoulder, like that. And I have to try once again to play lucky if I can. Étant donné l'existence telle qu'elle jaillit des récents travaux publics de Poinçon et Wattman, d'un dieu personnel, quoi, à barbe blanche, mais on a le temps, on reverra ça.
From Paris, Waiting for Godot would soon make its way across the world, establishing Samuel Beckett as the most original and influential dramatist of the century. The first English edition, translated by Beckett, was published in New York by Barney Rossett and Grove Press.
Like George Bernard Shaw, Sean Casey, and James Joyce before him. Because of Waiting for Godot and other of his works, Samuel Beckett has won for himself a reputation as one of the great writers of our time. There have been almost as many interpretations of Godot as there have been members of the audience. Samuel Beckett himself calls his play a tragic comedy and leaves it at that.
Waiting for Godot was as well known as a sports term as it was known in the theater world. And I think that's a very important thing. The sports writers picked up on Beckett, I think, faster than the literary people. They understood that, waiting for the great event to happen, which never quite happens. So he had become, I'd say, in a very few years, but after all, when Beckett was no longer young, he was already, I believe, in his 50s, he burst into the sensitivities and the knowledge and the world of all of America.
Success and failure on the public level never mattered much to me. In fact, I feel much more at home with the latter, having breathed deep of its vivifying air all my writing life up to the last couple of years.
He was less poor after the war, when became the great success of Godot. And he was very generous with his friends. And he was helping a lot of poor men and families, and he bought a house in Seine-et-Marne, and he bought his new flat in Boulevard Saint-Jacques. And life was more easy to him.
We have found and taken a room in a farmhouse at Ussy-sur-Marne. Marvelous country. Peace. It is a relief to have a refuge when the strain of noise, neighbors, visits, and art cackle become unbearable.
Sam and Suzanne had walked that area. They'd taken the train out to Ussy. They'd stayed in Ussy in a house owned by a farmer. They'd walked the countryside. They knew it. And they chose the spot on top of a hill with a wonderful view over the valley. They bought the land from the commune. And my father, who was an architect, a quantity surveyor, designed the house. My mother took a photograph at that time of my father, Frank, Sam and Suzanne standing in the garden, my father with his arms around Sam and Suzanne. They all look very happy. They look as if Frank and Sam had been doing a hard day's work in the garden, because Sam was very fond of that garden. This house was vital to him for his work. It's somewhere he could go to work. At the beginning, Suzanne used to accompany him. At a certain point, Suzanne stopped going down to the house, not because she didn't like it. People said, oh, she didn't like it down there. But it wasn't because of that. It was because she knew that Sam needed solitude.
Fortunately, my father died when I was a boy. Otherwise, I might have been a professor. He had set his heart on it. A very fair scholar I was, too. No thought, but a great memory. One day I told him about Milton's cosmology. Way up in the mountains we were, resting against a huge rock, looking out to sea. That impressed him greatly. Love, too, often in my thoughts when a boy, but not a great deal compared to other boys. It kept me awake, I found. Never loved anyone, I think. I'd remember. In a way, perhaps it's a pity. A good woman might have been the making of me. I might be sprawling in the sun now, sucking my pipe and patting the bottoms of the third and fourth generation, looked up to and respected, wondering what there was for dinner instead of stravaiging the same old roads in all weathers. I was never much of a one for new ground. No, I regret nothing. All I regret is having been born. Dying is such a long, tiresome business, I always found.
For a long, long time, I only saw the one side of him. A kindly, generous, wonderful uncle to my brother and myself. And it wasn't really, I suppose, till I was into my 20s that I saw the other side, his work side. I'd like to show you a very special place in our garden. This pond was built at a rather poignant time when my father was dying of cancer, and my uncle had come over from Paris to stay with us and be a great support to my mother. It's very fitting that you should have come to this garden today, because this is the first day the lilies have flowered in this new season. This photograph would have been taken in the early summer of 1954. My father died in September, so it was really in the last months of his illness when he knew that, we all knew that he wasn't going to live. And I think my mother and Sam must have hatched a plot between them. They wanted to provide a distraction for my father when he was so ill. And between them, they created this lovely pond. My father was an engineer, so he had the wherewithal to get that side of it going. My mother was an artistic person, so she did the artistic direction. And Sam, probably the most important part of all, he was the labourer.
Beckett's first post-war work in English was All That Fall, a radio play broadcast in 1957. It was the beginning of a long and creative relationship with the BBC.
Well, this is Studio B5. In this studio and others like it, here in the basement of Broadcasting House, we did a lot of recordings at which Samuel Beckett very often unexpectedly appeared. It was here in these studios that the famous Beckett voice and the Beckett actor was being evolved. Here we did all these readings of his poetry and of his prose pieces, and all the Beckett actors that he adored so much came here and sat here. Patrick Magee, Jack McGowran, Billy Whitelaw, Ronald Pickup, Nicol Williamson, all these enormously dedicated actors who love to do these texts that seem to be difficult if one read them, but in their mouths, in their voices, they suddenly came to wonderful life. And of course, he himself would watch the proceedings from the cubicle and then come in and work with the actors.
The distinctive voice of the Irish actor Patrick Magee intrigued Beckett. This cracked voice, as he described it, was the inspiration for a new stage drama with the working title Magee Monologue. The one-act play was finally named Crapp's Last Tape.
Lie propped up in the dark and wander. Be again in the dingle on the Christmas Eve, gathering holly, the red berret. Be again on Croghan on a Sunday morning in the haze with the bitch. Stop and listen to the bells. And so on. Be again. Be Again. All that old misery? Once wasn't enough for you?
The impact I received of his work was as great as the one I received from Lao Tse when I was 16. That means, you see, it's not a literary experience. It's an experience of profundity, of vision, of wisdom. Then I knew that this man is somebody who would appear on Earth once, a person like that, once in 500 years. And then I met him. And when I met him, I couldn't believe it. And he was really somebody like that. I mean, so you would compare him to Petrarca or Dante or Goethe or these people. And once in a few centuries, somebody like that appears. A crystal. A spiritual crystal. That means that where ethics and aesthetics fuse.
Sam and Suzanne left Rue des Favorites in 1960 and moved to a new apartment block on Boulevard Saint-Jacques.
The flat is on the 7th floor of a 1960s building. This building was only planned at that time. So he met with the builder and the architect and specified exactly what he wanted. That's where he did his work, he did his correspondence. He spent a lot of his lifetime in that room. A typewriter, telephone, very simple lamp, uncluttered desk, a very large wastepaper basket, necessary part. There are the reference books, his dictionaries, a big array of dictionaries, a copy of Johnson's dictionary, which he used, I know, and copies of the Bible in many languages. Apart from that, there were copies of his own books that he needed for reference and also to give to people. A lot of Joyce's books, a large amount of books on Samuel Johnson, books by Johnson, and books about Johnson. The one, of course, thing that strikes people when they look from the window of that studio is the prison, the Prison de la Santé, which is directly opposite the flat. And, of course, people say that that is typical. He must have chosen it for the prison, but I don't believe it for one moment.
He lived with Suzanne for many years before they got married, and that was in the 60s. And one day he rang me up and asked if I could very discreetly arrange a little ceremony, which I did in Folkestone, and nobody knew anything about it. And he just came over quietly, and they spent a few days driving down the coast looking at Devon and Cornwall. I think he wanted Suzanne, if anything happened to him, to get the benefit of his royalties and his work, to give her some kind of position.
Suzanne, in a funny way, was rather a little bit like my grandmother, Sam's mother, because she was a little bit unapproachable until you got to know her. But again, underneath, she was lovely, and I got very fond of her. I used to correspond with her quite a lot when I came home from that particular time. And I can remember making her things, and she was very keen that I would improve my French. So I used to write to her in French. I don't think she was a person one could ever get very close to, but I think I got as close as I dared.
Si je vous ai parlé déjà de la façon dont Suzanne voulait être incognito.
Suzanne wished to remain incognito in all she did concerning Sam's work, because she never forgot the time when she went around with a manuscript of Waiting for Godot and was turned down again and again. With the words, "Rejected manuscript," it was handed back to her.
Le manuscrit d'En attendant Godot, tout cela, elle ne l'a pas oublié. Et quand la pièce a eu le succès qu'elle a eu ultérieurement,
When the play met with success, the very same people now rushed to talk to her in adulation. She couldn't stand it.
Et pour l'aduler. Et ça, elle ne l'acceptait pas. Donc, le rôle de Suzanne était aussi...
Suzanne also had her part to play. Everyone understood that though Sam never attended his productions, in France or abroad, that Suzanne was there as his ambassador.
One day I was doing something quite difficult, and there was not a great audience, and I was surprised to see her after the show. I said, "Oh, you were there?" And she said, "Oh, yes. I'm always there in lost causes."
They were hardly leaving the bus together, but they were hardly leaving without the other one, you know. And when I was with Suzanne, Suzanne asked to me, "Don't drink too much with Sam." And when I was with Sam, he told me, "We take care of Suzanne because she's like a child." You know?
Beckett made his only visit to America in 1964. He crossed the Atlantic to supervise Film, a cinematic work starring Buster Keaton.
Well, when Sam came to New York, this was the neighborhood which he first saw, and perhaps the only one, as far as I know. This neighborhood, which is now known as Soho, then had no name. I had asked Sam to write a motion picture, which he did, and called Film. We had thought to use Patrick McGee in the main part, or Sam had, but something happened, he couldn't make it. And later, we tried to get Charlie Chaplin, and he was not available. And then Sam said Buster Keaton. So if Sam said Buster Keaton, we went out to find Buster Keaton, and find him we did. And he came here, and he was in the film. My relationship to Keaton was exactly zero. What Sam's was, I really don't know, because Keaton did not communicate. I never heard the man say a word. But Sam somehow worked with him, and it went off in various problems, but we did the film. Sam was such a gentleman that I never was quite clear as to what he really felt, but I think that he thought of it as a different kind of an experience, and one that need not necessarily be repeated.
Past midnight, never knew such silence. The earth might be uninhabited. Here I end this reel. Box 3, spool 5. Perhaps my best years are gone, when there was a chance of happiness. But I wouldn't want them back. Not with the fire in me now. No, I wouldn't want them back.
In December 1969, the Swedish Academy announced Samuel Beckett the winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature. Jérôme Landin, his French publisher, accepted the award on his behalf. Beckett, together with his wife, avoided the glare of publicity by travelling to North Africa.
I knew him in Tanger. I met him in Tanger. One day in the street, I was with my Leica, and as I saw a wonderful bird, un héron. It was him. I tried to follow him, not because he was Beckett, I did not know yet, toujours he was Beckett. And I took photograph of this wonderful statue. And one day, at Gagarin, I said, "You are Beckett?" He said, "Yes." And we walked on the beach during hours. And when we were on this beach of Tanger, he said to me something very strange about his mother. He said, if she could see that I got the Nobel Prize.
He never took it really as a success. He believed that that's a misunderstanding. He said it also many times. He said, there's a misunderstanding, that these things shouldn't have success. So he took it with a grain of salt, you see.
I have heard him called a saint, but I don't think he was at all, and I think he would have hated to be called one. He was a wonderful man, a great human being, but luckily for us, he wasn't a saint. He was such fun and full of mischief and humour and joys of living. I mean, he loved drinking and wandering around Paris. We really had a night out with Sam, and we all went and had dinner in the Coupole, and we went to UNESCO's play when UNESCO came too. But Sam never watched plays very much, so he went out for a walk and came back. And then UNESCO went home, and we all went on. I had my second daughter with us. And we went steadily around all the bars, and as each one shut, we went to another one. And we were getting very, very pissed, to be honest. So was Sam. But there was this wonderful conversation going on between Sam and George. Sam was debating whether it was possible to write a play with no action, with just words and some visual image, but no action at all. And we arrived at the Falstaff, and it was all shut up with iron railings and things. And to our amazement, Sam knocked on the door, and everything opened, and this pub was completely filled with people at 6 o'clock in the morning. And so we started another session there, and I think we lasted till about 7 or 7:30, and then we went home, but we left him there because we just couldn't keep awake anymore. And the result of this conversation, sometime later, was Not I, this play with just the mouth talking, and which Billy Whitelaw did at the Royal Court.
Well, I used to walk into this theatre through the stage door to start rehearsing Not I. I would see Sam standing in the corner. I'd walk in from the stage door that way, Sam would be there, and we wouldn't say, "Good morning, Billy, good morning, Sam, how are you?" None of that. We'd launch straight in without a word of out into this world, a tiny little thing before its time, godforsaken hole, called. No matter, parents unknown, unheard of, he having vanished, thin air, no sooner button up his breeches, she similarly 8 months later, almost at the tick, so no love spared that.
I think everybody had their own reactions to him, but the general feeling of wanting to create what he wanted. Well, it's very rare, really, in the theatre that you get a whole theatre together feeling like that about someone.
There was a total commitment. For me, it was like working with not only a writer and a director, but like working with a painter and a sculptor and a musician and a conductor. In fact, practically every photograph you see of Sam and me is we're conducting each other. I would walk over hot coals for that man.
As rewarding in his personal life as he was in his professional one. But he was very witty, very charming, very knowledgeable. Great fun to be with. We used to laugh a lot. We very rarely spoke about great philosophical matters or anything of import. We would wander around having drinks together in a drinking club in Kensington or drinking Jameson in his hotel in Hyde Park. Wander around all over the place, just generally having fun like a couple of big kids.
We were rehearsing Happy Days, and Leonard Fenton was crawling up the mound towards Billy Whitelaw, who's buried up to the waist in the mound. And he wasn't, from Sam's point of view, wasn't doing it right, wasn't doing it how Sam wanted it done. And Sam was finding it, I think, very, very difficult to explain to Leonard exactly what he wanted at what specific time. It was so precise where he wanted him to go down, where he wanted him to come up, that I think it was frustration after about an hour of trying to do this. Everybody broke for lunch. Everybody disappeared, and I was left here. There was a few levels I wanted to play with on the actual lighting stage, so I went to the lighting box, looked out the window, and there's Sam crawling up the mound. And I happened to have my camera up there, so I stole a few of his private moments, I suppose. But it's quite amazing to watch him for half an hour crawling about on stage. And then he topped that off. When he got back, I think he'd actually worked it out for himself what he wanted, then rehearsed Leonard in about 10 minutes, and it was fine. And Sam crawled round the back of the mound, popped the top hat on, and appeared over the top.
When we were rehearsing on this stage, the play ends with Winnie singing to a little box, a little musical box, the Merry Widow Waltz. And he said, Billy, I will just sing this to you so you know the tune. And I said, well, I know it. He said, no, I'll sing it to you. And this is what came out of his mouth. Well, had I not known it was the Merry Widow, I would have not known what he was singing. But I found it so moving and so marvellous that I took it without telling him. He didn't realise I'd stolen it from him. And at the end of the play, the lights go down, or the start, and Winnie just sings this, and this is what I did. Every touch of finger tells me what I know, says to me it's true, you love me so.
All my drawings of Sam were done not to order, I would say. I wouldn't say, come sit for me. He would sit in this chair, listen to music. So I would draw him, or another chair, or here. I mean, all this was, or standing, or he would feel. That means I would, he would feel that else I wouldn't move. His face was extraordinary. It was like a labored, like a field, a plowed field, you know, with all these lines. It's incredible. He had a very beautiful face. And the thing with him is that his interiority, his inner light was in his face. He always used to say, well, we usually spoke French, but Anne used to speak English, but then we spoke also both. But in the past, our friendship began in French. He always used to say, le monde est plein de détresse. Distress is everywhere, you see. He was very upset by it.
He was a man who loved sports, who followed sports, anyone who spoke to him a long time. He loved rugby and golf, and he followed games passionately on television. Sometimes he wouldn't even come over because there was a game on that he wanted to see. And he loved walking, his Luxembourg especially. And he loved shuffling through the leaves, and he said it always reminded him that he did the same thing when he was a boy. He spoke fondly of his childhood. He had a happy childhood. Music was, it either began the evening or it ended the evening, but it was the key of the evening. Besides poetry, we used to read a lot of poetry together. But music was the key. And it was Schubert for many years, but at the very end it ended up to just three or four Lieder.
Ich träumt in seinem Schatten so manchen süßen Traum.
Memories stayed with him until the very end. When we went to see him in Paris, my daughter and myself, he was talking about the Wicklow Mountains. And I feel as if he had taken a snapshot in his mind, which just stayed with him forevermore.
Nowhere in particular on the way from A to Z. That dear old back road. Somewhere on the Ballyogan Road on the way from A to Z. Heads sunk, totting up the tally on the verge of the ditch. Foothills to left. Croker's Acres ahead. Father's shade to right and a little to the rear. Out since break of day and night now falling. Reckoning ended, on together from naught anew.
Almost every last work that he wrote from about 1970 onward had the feeling of being a final work. You know, you always felt everything was rounded off. Then somehow he managed to write a little more, to go a little bit further. He said to me once that all he ever tried to do was put his head against the rock cliff and push it another millimeter away. And all his life was just pushing a little bit more the limits of the possibilities of creation, getting a little bit more out of literature, saying a little bit more about the human condition.
All of old. Nothing else ever tried, ever failed. No matter. Try again. Fail again. Fail better.
Sam described to me the difficulty that he was having with his work, and he described it to me as the lines of a V converging, and that he was being cornered. He couldn't get through these converging lines.
Folly for to need to seem to glimpse a faint afar away over there what? What is the word? What is the word?
The thing that people noticed was his gradual lack of mobility, and of course it's something that affected him greatly because he was a great walker, loved getting around, and once he felt that he couldn't do that, and that really depressed him. Already he couldn't go down to UC anymore. He couldn't stay there on his own. That was a great sadness for him. Gradually, he found walking difficult, had to take a stick, couldn't go far, and that was a tremendous loss to him. I think of all the things, that was the one that really struck him the most. He said to me one time, we were talking about something, he said, Edward, old age, not much fun, And he didn't find it much fun. And of course, after Suzanne's death, that was no fun at all. Suzanne was the first to go, the summer of '89. And Sam died within 6 months of Suzanne.
Samuel Beckett died in Paris on December the 22nd, 1989. He was 83. He is buried beside his wife, Suzanne, in Montparnasse Cemetery. The private ceremony was attended by a score of close friends. There was no religious service and no speeches.
Perhaps thus the end. Then all is before again. So again and again. And patience till the one true end to time and grief and self and second self his own.